Hey, remember when I said this? It kind of was like, oh man, is it just kind of like this like really like smutty type stuff that I don't necessarily want to like read chapters of like one scene, but actually it's not. It's a fantasy story through and through. Well, we need to really talk about that because I have just finished A Court of Mist and Fury, and the answer might have changed. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Graham, and I do book reviews here every single week. I also do a lot of other bookish videos and try to make it fun here. So if you're new here, go ahead and hit that button that's down there. It's always a good time to hang out with me, right? That being said, let's talk about this book. There's going to be a spoiler-free review in the first half, and then at the end, I will definitely, just like the last video, give predictions and talk about some stuff that I was very excited for. But let's answer that question first off, because this book starts out with a bang. That was a joke, because this book does start off with the spice. It's pretty spicy immediately between Feyre, and that's her name now. I was saying Feyre in the first episode. Feyre and Tamlin. It was spicy. It was just going, and you were like, okay, I get why this series has that stigma of being smut, I guess you could say, or in a very adult book. But then we go for about 500 pages without anything in this book. And so is this series really smutty? I don't know. I think it's just very detailed, but there's always impact with it as well. And so you don't have to worry about this. I don't think this series could be counted as just blatant smut, in my opinion. This is actually a really good high fantasy story with Fae. It really is. It really, really is. The first book was kind of mediocre for me, but the second book really did some cool things because Feyre goes through all of her stuff in the first book, and she finally makes it reunited with Tamlin, becomes what she needs to be. I guess I can't really spoil this book if you've read the first one. So it doesn't matter. I might spoil the first book. There you go. That's your warning. So Feyre dies in the first book and is resurrected. And so you're following a lot with that in here and figuring that out. I had a lot of predictions going on with the end of my last review, and those predictions were Tamlin and Feyre were going to be split apart, and I was right on that. You get to be entered into the Night Court as Rhysand holds up his pact with her and bond, and they go back and forth between the Night Court. I really enjoyed the imagery of the Night Court here. And then I was also right about Rhysand. He started getting worried about the King of Pyra, I believe is what it's called, and he started planning against that. And so you really got to see the plot at the end of the first one be able to go, but there was so much other stuff I should have predicted because this book was really bonkers. And so let's kind of break it up a little bit. Back to the Night Court. The Night Court was awesome. You got to actually go there and see, you got to see where Rhysand hung out, you got to see his friends, and you got to see a little piece of his world, because in the first book he is really talked about as being a torturer and a very evil type person. And so I really enjoyed being able to see his dark, gloomy world and also be able to see his lightness as well. In the first book, there was this feeling that he was there to protect Feyre a lot. He was doing things to appear bad, but were actually really good. And this book really expounds on that more. So you get more of that relationship. And I don't really want to use the trope. I don't really like how it says enemies to lovers as like the thing for this romantasy genre. Like, this is an enemies to lovers story. Honestly, I think that Feyre is just unobservant because I don't really think Rhysand was ever really an enemy, and that's just my opinion. I think he was just a really good guy. So you get to see a lot of the Night Court, and I really think it was very beautifully described and also terrifying to describe as well. The Fae has that light and that darkness all amongst with it. They have a lot of creepy monsters while they also have a lot of beautiful things of artistry, and that was explained really well with the Spring Court too in the first book when Feyre was with Tamlin. And so you really get to see this whole other territory and how cool it was. We also go to the Summer Court, and I really like the imagery there. I really liked what the fairies looked like there and the powers that were being used there. Water abilities is really cool. The way I'm kind of thinking about these fairies now is instead of like 4 elements like Avatar: The Last Airbender, you have 8, and they all have different things. And so there's fire, but also now darkness and like light and earth and all that type of stuff is mixed in to this. And so it kind of feels like an Avatar: The Last Airbender situation with Feyre, which is cool because she was resurrected by the power of all the High Lords. So you kind of get to have a discovery of that as well. And so the Night Court was great. Feyre as a character developed a lot. One of my predictions was she would go through a depression quite a bit, and she does. And I think that's where we kind of go back to that like smutty thing. You needed to experience that like sexual tension or those weird experiences with Tamlin in the beginning to see how depressed she was, because she was kind of just using it as a way to escape in the beginning, and it was written in that way. It's very fascinating. I'm not experienced in this world of romance and romantasy, and if all books like this in this genre are explained in this way, then awesome. But I feel like the stigma against A Court of Thorns and Roses has been very like, this is not my fantasy. This has all the elements of your fantasy. It just takes those adult topics and actually makes them more story driven, which is something I have not used to reading. And it's not bad. It's not in your face. It's descriptive, yes, in certain things, but it's not in your face. And so I feel like it did a really good job of using those sexual situations to really showcase Feyre's depression. And they did a really great job about that. They did a good job of having Feyre go through the steps and eventually want to move forward in her relationships as well. She gains a lot of friendships in this book. She ends up learning more about the Night Court, as I said, and gaining more of a friendship with Riesland, and ends up having different feelings towards Tamlin and Lucien. I will admit that Lucien, no matter what in this series, I like him. I like Lucien a lot. I like Riesland too, and I like Cassian a lot as my favorite. More is cool. I don't know. Everyone's pretty good in this book. I enjoy the characters a lot in this story, and that's something the story has a lot going for. If you want really cool characters to get behind with all these different personalities, I really do think that the series is great. The first book only shows you like 3 core characters. This book expands even more, and you go like, oh, I like you. I like how broody you are, Cassian, and how you're like, oh, I'm gonna go be a buff guy and do all this stuff. That's awesome. So I loved that type of thing, and the characters are really well done in this book. And so the characters writing is great. The world building is fantastic. I really enjoyed it. The second book, comparatively, is way better than the first one. So if you liked the first one and are debating, but like didn't like it a lot and are debating to go into the second one is great. I hate that when people say TV shows aren't great until you hit the 10th episode. But it's very true in this, and it makes up for the lackness of the first book. There's a lot of callbacks to the story in the first book, and you almost get a different perspective of the events that happen there that do pay off really, really well. So this book's really cool in that way. Night Court's great. Characters great. Payoff is awesome. And descriptions are stellar. And you know what? There's spice. And the spice is good. It's not cringy. There's story behind it and reasons why. And then you hit the last 150 pages of this story, and it's like a roller coaster or an avalanche of information that is really, really good and makes you go like, oh my gosh. I was saying that all the time. My wife was just in the same room with me as I was reading it. I was like, I gotta finish this today. I was just like, are you serious? What in the world? And I would explain to her everything that happened, and because it was good. It was good writing. I kept being like, this is dramatic, and this is crazy, and this is a roller coaster. And I really enjoyed and had a lot of fun with the second book. So if you like the first one, you'll like the second one. It gets better. The second book is better. So yeah, I would check out this book. It's really good. I would continue the series. And as far as rating wise, I'm trying to figure out my own rating system now. I realize that my past reviews have been watching for a little bit. I'm pretty much like 4 or 5 stars, because there's so much to go with it. I had a lot of fun in this book. There was a lot of reveals and payoff that was really good. And I really enjoy the characters, and they're memorable in a really good way. And I love that as a reader. And so honestly, I was trying to think of what I would give this rating out of a 5-star type thing. And I personally would give it like a 4.25 stars. Like, it was great, and I really enjoyed it. It was high up there. It's not quite a 5-star read. I don't know if this series will ever hit 5 stars for me, because there wasn't emotions that really have pulled out of me yet. I understand the characters are depressed and going through certain things, and it might hit different for different readers. It's not to say that it won't impact you. If you cry in this book, amazing. I know my wife loved the story of getting out of depression because it connected really well with her and how she fought through it. And for me, it wasn't impacting me in that way. I don't know why. I understood it though. I was like, cool, yeah, you're going over this. That makes sense. Maybe I'm just emotionally unavailable, guys. Just kidding. But yeah, I enjoyed it. Give it a read. 4.25 out of 5 stars for there. Alright, so we're gonna jump into spoilers now because there's a lot that really was awesome and good about this book that I want to talk about. There was moments that were like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. And one of them is the romance. I really enjoy the romance story of this. There were parts that made me mad at Feyre. Like, Feyre being so upset right off the bat about the mate part. Even though the mate part kind of felt thrown a little bit, but the part where it's like, he's my mate. Wait, the person said mate. And Riesland confirmed it, and then she was mad at Riesland. I was kind of annoyed at. But then the way she went about it in the cabin was really heartwarming, and then Riesland coming in and sharing everything from the first book almost, but from his perspective, was awesome. Great payoff, great building in the relationship, and really cool on being able to build two different relationships, one with Tamlin, one with Riesland, and showing them being very distinct, with her discovering it on her own, with you discovering it with her. Tamlin was a terrible relationship, but you were experiencing it with her where you didn't really realize it was a terrible relationship until you had the outside eyes of Riesland. And so you were there with it being like, oh yeah, he is kind of bad. Oh, he's doing that. And then having her recover that relationship and having a good one was a really good replacement. And you can get at me in the comments if you want, if you're like, Tamlin was a bad relationship. I feel like Sarah J. Maas wrote Tamlin to be very well, and their relationship was always kind of small, in my opinion, kind of their like lust more than love. And so I felt it still kind of stayed that because it was bringing some sort of happiness, but you realize later that Feyre is using it as escapism, right? So it was cool to be able to take that old relationship and be invested in it, and then have a new one that you're like, oh, this is actually the better guy for you, and be able to actually like live through that experience. And maybe it's just because I'm not used to seeing that side of a relationship either on toxicity. Maybe I'm just always toxic, you know? Also, the reveals at the end with the cauldron were fantastic. She goes in, it feels like a fever dream, you're like, what is happening? And then all of a sudden, she gets captured, Jurian is there, the eyeball ring, that was a great reveal, I love that. The ring on Amarantha being the main bad guy, or one of the main bad guys, so cool. That is up there for cool characters. I want to know more about that guy and see more from him, which is great. I love the negotiation with the queens as well, as soon as right before the cauldron, where they give the information of this like sacred safe city, which is beautiful, by the way. I didn't want to mention that in the spoiler free area, but it was a beautiful city, and I love the artistry of it in the night court. Having it be attacked all of a sudden and her body just like hitting and being just there was insane, and I loved it. It was great, and it was a great scene. That being said, the cauldron, seeing him show up, seeing the king there, and then seeing Tamlin and Lucien show up in order to take Feyre was just mind-boggling. And having a convention on all the powers, and then having that ending with the bond was good. But the part that was so well done, because there was hints of it. There was hints of Cassian and Nesta, and Cassian being like, rah, and they're just hard-headed, fighting against each other. Nesta is being Feyre's sister. And then having Nesta and Elaine become fairies was incredible. We also get another queen as a fairy as well. It's one of my predictions. She's going to be pretty prominent. What happened with one of the sisters, Elaine, is as soon as she became a fairy, that Lucien was like, you're my mate. And you're like, oh crap. He was very upfront about it and all that type of stuff. But I was hoping that you would see the queen go in there, and then Tamlin would be like, you're my mate. And that's one of my predictions. I do think that other queen might be Tamlin's mate. It'd be very funny and terrible at the same time, because now Feyre is in Tamlin's court after getting married to Riesland all the way, and is a high lady of the night court. Great storytelling. Loved it. Very good. The twist at the end, every single beat wasn't missed. Payoff was wonderful. I think the book was very well done. So let's move on to predictions. I already mentioned one. I do think that queen that is getting eternal life from the human queens or becoming a fae is going to be Tamlin's person and also play a really prominent role. I think with Feyre inside the Spring Court, I am very excited for her to actually pull Lucien in on the plans. I think that's what's going to happen. They're kind of looking like enemies right now, but I think Lucien and her end up going to becoming really close and really good friends, and that mating bond between him and Elaine are going to be really cool and clutch, and Feyre will approve of it by the end of the next book. I think that's going to happen. I think the king in the next book, I don't know how many books are going to be. I don't know if it ends at book 3. But I think they will fight the king. Cassian and Nesta will also getting in a relationship, which would be cool. I think Tamlin is ending up going to still be a terrible person until like the very end. It's going to be like this weird sacrifice thing where he realizes he needs to grow up. And I think that will happen. And I think he will be like the ending point for the king. I think he is necessary to kill the king. And that's where I think it's going. We still have so many other courts to go to, like Autumn Court and whatever, the other courts. And so I'm excited to be able to see those because those will come into play, especially with Lucien. We will probably see him somehow get into power of his court, even though he's been put out, and become his own thing. That's another prediction I have. And so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Those are a lot of things going on. I'll have like a list there of that. So yeah, I'm excited. This is a good series. I really am enjoying it, and I'm very glad I picked it up. I'm glad my wife she told me to read these books because they are good and they are fun, and I'm having a great time. I hope you've enjoyed this review. I hope it was informational. This is a very adult book. This does have a lot of graphic violence and graphic sexual content too. But I don't think that it's smut. I think that it does really well with the storytelling. And you could skip around to those chapters and just have fun with it, I guess. But they were very prominent in what the storytelling was and was showcasing different things. Now, I don't know for the rest of the series. It could get even worse where you're like, now it's just turned into this like bacchanal of things. And you're like, nice, this is crazy. But I do enjoy the second book a lot. And I think you will too. So give it a try. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Toodles.